Right. Welcome. We are going to let people come in. We've got a number of people joining us today. We appreciate you all being here to talk about the employment law advice available through Catapult Employers Association. We're going to give some great information on how to get great legal advice for your employment needs. So I'm going to give it a minute as I'm watching people come in. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started to honor everyone's time. So I am Shay Prosser, Chief Marketing and Engagement Officer for Catapult Employers Association. And I've got with me Rob Wood from Soule Law Firm. So Rob, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your firm's expertise.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. So our firm is Soule Employment Law Firm. We're located in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we have 4 attorneys, 3 of which are very experienced employment law attorneys. And then there's me, who manages the operations of the firm. And we just celebrated our 10th anniversary. We specialize in, we focus our practice solely on employment law for small and medium-sized companies. And then obviously we have 2 of our employment law attorneys are staff the legal advice plan that we're talking about today, the employment law advice plan. So, and they are solely full-time dedicated to that plan, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 p.m. Eastern time. And we are solely focused on, as I said, employment law and especially employment practices and general employment law advice.
Right. So the way that this works is we have a very special relationship with Soule where members of Catapult Employers Association, through either their standard membership or our premium membership, have access to their lawyers for specific questions. So the way this works is that you call into our HR advice line and you've got a general question, and our HR advisor will be able to say, hey, that's something we really think we're going to need to get our legal advisors on, and then we're going to connect you with them. So a lot of it is our HR advisors will do a little triage, ask them questions, see whether it's a legal question or whether it's an HR question. A lot of things we find really are a little bit of both. So we work together very closely with the lawyers from Soule to make sure that we're getting them the great abilities to answer questions for our members. This is a benefit of membership. So I know we've got many advisors. We got many members on the call. We also have people who might not be familiar with Catapult Employers Association, the member services that we have. So we will offer you an opportunity to learn more about our services and how we help. But at a very high level, Catapult Employers Association helps you with the people side of your organization. So we can give employment law advice, HR advice. We can help you with recruiting, learning and development. We can help with background checks. So there's a number of things that we can do across the gamut of the things that you need for the HR needs of your company. This is just one of the many things and one of our most highly prized benefits of membership is the ability to talk with employment lawyers without having to open a new case or have someone on retainer. The benefit of this is you can call in and get someone you know is of very high quality and ask just the question that might be on your mind. Or if you go, gosh, is this an issue or is this not? So Rob, I'd love for you to talk. Well, I'm going to give one caveat. We will not be giving actual legal advice today. We will be talking about employment law and the types of employment law advice that we give. So if you do have an actual legal question, if you are a member, we would welcome you to call into our advice line after this and talk to our team. If you are not a member, we would also welcome you to call Catapult and find out about membership and how you can get this benefit for your company. So I know that our team is going to put the phone number for Catapult in. So we'd love for you to stay on with us today and then call afterwards if you've got legal questions. So Rob, we're going to start out with what types of employment law advice are in the highest demand right now?
So right now, I mean, it's always reasonable accommodations is always high in demand. It's a very confusing area for people. So reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act Oftentimes how that act also interacts with other laws such as FMLA, workers' compensation, and even the company's benefit plans. So we kind of help people, guide people through that, the interactive process through that. And then that typically is a long process where the employee is receiving medical care and the situation is changing. So as that situation evolves, we're providing advice on how to handle that situation as it evolves. In addition to that, we review a lot of contracts, a lot of employment contracts. So we'll look at a contract, we'll spot for big issues like enforceability or high risk areas, and we'll provide advice on those contracts. We might provide advice that this contract needs to be rewritten, or you need a different kind of contract, things like that. We'll review important employment law policies. I mean, so handbook policies are different, maybe a remote work policy or different kinds of things. So we'll look at that from a legal lens and see if there are any compliance issues, see if it's effective when it's sort of paired with your other employment law policies and practices. And then there's the discrimination, retaliation, all those different kinds of things that come into, if you're changing someone's pay, if you're disciplining them, if you want to terminate somebody, all those types of things. Those are always big. And then I'd say right now there's an uptick in things like reductions in force, layoffs, business condition, the economy, business conditions changing, and people needing help through those oftentimes because they've never done them before.
Those are great. I was actually just in a meeting with one of our Soule partners, and she was talking about having an organization that called and said, gosh, we've got this employee that was, on a performance plan, and then they came in with an accommodation request. And we just want to be done with it. We just want to not have to deal with this anymore. And, in a short period, she was able to guide them through that. And they called a couple weeks later and said, hey, we did end up parting ways with this employees, but it happened in a way that leaves us very, very low risk of any kind of other issues, where they felt that their knee-jerk reaction would have left them in a much worse situation. And so she was able to resolve that. And probably what she said is, probably a 15-20 minute phone call for that particular one, because it was pretty easy for her, but, difficult for them. And they might have been a little bit in that moment where you just want to be done with something. You just want to have it done. So she's able to provide that. So you said something a little bit about remote, and I want to dig into that a little bit. So
sure.
What impact have hybrid workplaces, remote workforces, and those type of things had on the types of questions that your team is receiving?
I just think, there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of economic reasons to do hybrid work, or remote work's just become a reality, but you do have to really update all of your practices and policies. They touch on so many different aspects. So I think a lot of times you're just getting maybe those policies and practices aren't fitting the reality, and so you need to update those so you can guide through a question about who is entitled to the remote work, or big one is what laws apply, because people are used to a certain North Carolina. But if somebody is doing remote work from California, then you're now a California employer. And if, say, they're doing it from San Francisco, then you're also a San Francisco employer. And that comes with a whole nother, set of laws and way of looking at the employment relationship. So you're really looking, it's implicating so many different things. The contracts that you might have with people might need to be updated. That might have changed the condition to it's not functioning the way you want it to. So it definitely implicates all types of policies, practices, contracts, and the laws that apply. And so you really want to understand how that all works and what you might need to do to update it. And luckily, under the plan, you can have those conversations about what this is impacting. Within North Carolina and South Carolina, you can get advice on those particular laws. You can get advice on federal laws. But even if the employee is in a completely different area, you can understand how that's going to change and what additional work would maybe need to be done outside the plan to help with that.
That's huge. I know that a lot of our members, and we've faced this question internally as well, which is somebody's got an opportunity in another state, and they might have a spouse or partner that they want to move with, or something, for whatever reason they want to go to another state. And so being able to get ahead of what are the issues that might be presented to now have one employee or two employees in a certain state, or what you might want to at least look out for. And then the other things about, what does this do for the equity for other employees? Who have you said no to? Who's able to do this and who's not?
Yeah, ensuring you have a good policy and practices for making those decisions, making sure they're fair, making sure they're even equitably administered. I think also, it makes it harder to manage employees. So it makes performance issues go on maybe longer than they would prior to, or you find out about them later, make it harder sometimes to ensure that the performance is where you want it. And then other times, you're utilizing different kinds of software that might have employee privacy issues that that you need to talk through. So the whole host of things that, I think to your point earlier, where you have the advice team and you have the lawyers, it means that you have the ability to just have these conversations, to get your head wrapped around it all, to figure out what you need to do so you can make the right business decision.
That's huge. I was talking to a member who is actually the chief people officer of an organization. She is a lawyer herself, but she's not a practicing lawyer. And she said, gosh, just to bounce it around with somebody who's current on it, there's so many things that are changing so quickly. I don't want to make a mistake by not at least asking the question. So can you talk a little bit more about the types of services that are included? We spoke a little bit about some of the contracts, but talk a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so the plan was created to complement the HR advice team. So the idea is all those general employment questions that the HR advice team is getting, like you said, there's oftentimes a mix of business and legal in those questions. And so Catapult created this plan with our firm to make sure that those questions could get answered. So as you're thinking about, your offer letters and your employment contracts and your performance management and your terminations or discipline, all those general HR legal, HR and legal questions are covered under the plan. And you basically work with the attorneys over the telephone, virtually like this, or over email to ask those questions and get them answered. We can, under the plan, provide advice on, like I said, in federal, North Carolina and South Carolina law. So we can provide advice on those laws. We can help you sort of figure out those gray areas. That one of the benefit of working with doing this for so long and working with so many different businesses is we just have that built in. I think, like you said, we can kind of unravel it quickly. It might seem very complicated to somebody who only uses it a little bit, but our attorneys can unravel it pretty quickly and put a game plan together, help you sort of weigh legal risk and make decisions. Can look at your contracts, employment contracts, for sort of big issues and enforceability, and then tell you if it kind of help you maybe with minor sort of revisions or things to finalize those contracts. And we can review subpoenas, attorney demand letters, and provide advice on those. We can review your responses to things like the EEOC, Department of Labor. So kind of point out things you might want to say, or maybe there's weaknesses there or anything like that. So all of that is covered under the plan. And then if anything requires extended or custom work, so all that stuff I just talked about is that sort of short-term type work. But if you need original contracts drafted, if you need substantial revisions made, if you need somebody to actually draft those responses back, if you need, serious amounts of research done for opinions and advice, then those things get handled outside of the plan at a reduced rate.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, because what's covered with the plan is that advice and that review kind of advice, which a lot can be done with that. And the way it works for our members is that standard members, there's 5 hours of advice included. And for the vast majority of those, that is what they need. It's really an insurance policy for a lot of our members, so that when they have that question, it might take, 30 minutes, it might take an hour. So they have those a few times a year, and that's really great for them. And we do have a system where, for a standard member, if they do go over that 5 hours, they do also get the extended services at a reduced rate. But we also have a premium level. And in the premium level, there is unlimited employment law advice. So you can call much more often. This has been very beneficial to some of our members who have have areas that they work in that, they might have more details that they need to just walk through. They have certain professions that are more prone to having legal issues. So they'll call more often, or they got larger employee bases and they just need someone there at the ready to answer those questions. So is there anything else that you can think of, Rob, about what is covered or what's not covered by the plan?
Yeah, so I think it's important just what's not covered are things that are, like I said, anything that requires that sort of extended time or custom work. But I think also things like benefits, RISA law, immigration, litigation, any of those very specialized areas of employment law are not covered. Again, this is supposed to cover your day-to-day HR operations, your general employment questions that you would be calling the HR advice team about, and also needing to get some legal advice on about the employment relationship. And then, our firm, just be clear, we have the discounted rate, as I said, when things are not covered by the plan, but our firm does it. We don't do those other things, but we will find you a referral for that. Absolutely, to trusted people that we trust. And we're always happy to do that. And we do it frequently to find you the right resource you would need.
So one of the things that, when we're talking to members and potential members about this is, they talk about the cost of, if you do get into a lawsuit, we've got some stats on how much that costs, and it typically is well into the 6 figures. But one thing you and I've talked about is the non-financial cost of getting into a lawsuit. So talk to us a little bit about what you've seen when somebody does have to get involved with a lawsuit.
Yeah, I think, like you said, legal fees are very expensive, obviously, and the potential settlement or verdict could be very high as far as damages go. But it's a big part of it is just the distraction and the disruption that's caused as part of that. Discovery is very onerous. Really opening yourself up to all your practices and your past decisions that you've made, what you did in this, what a business might have done in this situation. So it can be very distracting. It can take time and focus away from the business, and it can also kind of hurt the culture as the rumor mill starts and things like that. So I think just in general, if you go back to your earlier point, we do this so often, and the issues are not as complicated as they seem if you do it a lot. And so if you can just talk to someone earlier and get a plan in place, you can usually make the business decision that you want to make, but without the pitfalls that would lead to all that. Because a lot of times maybe the claim itself is not going to be successful, but it's going to cause a lot of damage along the way. And I think that's what people, can really avoid.
Yeah. So are you able to share any examples of how your employment law attorneys have helped Catapult members avoid compliance headaches and or lawsuits?
Yeah, I think absolutely. There's, there's so many, right? That's why I struggle, is because almost everything, the earlier you can talk to someone, the better. So I think what we really see a lot is performance starts to dip, and then it takes a long time for them to reach out to have a conversation. And then they have sort of made that decision. They want to be done with the person. But in the meantime, someone's filed a workers' comp claim or done some sort of protected activity. And it's really hard from a legal standpoint to prove that that's not why you're making this decision when your documentation isn't clear on that fact. And so I think this plan is really well set up specifically to avoid that issue, to fix that issue. So where you would be possibly hesitant to reach out to a law firm, you don't have maybe the HR staff in-house, or you're busy, whatever, and then you don't want to reach out to a law firm, and then the thing just kind of snowballs, and then you're in that position. And so the plan is set up to try to remove those barriers so that you can call, so that you can have that discussion early. There's no reason not to. And if you do that, you will always walk away with a plan of action of some sort, or a clarity in your head of what you want to do. And, you might just have an idea of when I'm going to call back should something else happen. And that's just key, because if you deal with it at that time on those facts, it's easy to make that employment decision. But if you don't and other things accrue, then it becomes this big mess we're all sort of clear, sort of familiar with, that becomes very complicated.
Yeah, that's absolutely the having the plan sooner rather than later, so that you don't make it more complicated than it needs to be. So what are some of the common questions you guys get from members?
Like I said, the reasonable accommodations is a big one. Anything that just sort of pops up that's different, like workers' comp and how this is working, what they need to do. Again, we don't defend, but we can explain the process to them, and we can get them on the right path. FMLA, all these different new leave laws that are coming out, there's a lot of cities are passing, states and even cities are passing very generous leave laws, and sometimes very convoluted ones as well. And so we can kind of help straighten that out. If it's in the area under the plan, if it's outside the area, possibly through the firm. And then it's just trying to think, again, the layoffs is a big one lately, and any sort of harassment claims, things like that are always very topical, kind of helping just figure out how you're going to handle that under your policy with the investigation, how you're going to take appropriate action and things like that.
We've heard a lot about layoffs lately, and just about the idea of, hey, I'm not laying off yet, but gosh, I might, revenue might be a little bit down. So what do I need to do? Can I just use this as a reason to clean up a little bit?
Yes.
And I think that's where, your lawyers can get involved and really help make them make better decisions. So,
yeah, and I think that's one where people do want to do that, and they say, okay, there are very specific guidance that our attorneys give to help people make that call, so they don't have to say, well, no, that's really not going to fly. But we can say, okay, I understand. Let me tell you what that process looks like, so you can go do that. And I can kind of quarterback that a little bit to make sure it accomplishes what you're trying to accomplish. Sometimes people have their own idea of what needs to be done. So we can kind of work with them and maybe flesh that out a little bit more and see if there's a way to accomplish what, the overall goal, but that's also compliant.
Yeah, what I've been impressed with, just, having listened to some of the conversations after, the recaps of the conversations, is just how consultative it is and how non-threatening it is, to just have a good conversation with somebody who's an expert in that area. So I
was going to just jump in on that just so everyone's clear, that our conversations with you are totally confidential. The attorney-client privilege applies. So any conversation like that Shay's having is having with the member themselves, actually saying, this was so helpful, this was so easy. As far as we're independent, we're not part of Catapult. And so you have a totally traditional employment law, an attorney-client relationship on our side that keeps it confidential, attorney-client privilege, and none of that information goes back the other way. So just so you're very confident that you can have those open discussions with us.
Yeah, very, very good point, because absolutely the ways that I hear about things are from our members who say, oh, I avoided this issue, or something that was going to take us a lot of time took us very little time because we had good advice. I'm going to open it up that if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Again, we're not answering legal questions today, but we will talk about the plan or how it works. So I've got a couple more questions for Rob, but if any of you've got them, please put them in the chat and we'll make sure we get to them. We talked a little bit about the risk, but let's talk a little bit more about, if you don't have a convenient place to turn for legal advice. We know people often wait too long when they don't have the things. So what are some of the risks that you see when people wait too long to get the good advice they need?
Well, I think in one thing is it gets more expensive. Just very minor. It gets expensive if you wait too long and then you got to find an attorney, you got to catch them up on everything. But if you're using the HR advice team and the plan, then everyone's sort of up to speed on what's going on. And even if it's outside the plan, we already know what's going on. We can estimate it and we can kind of immediately help with whatever it is, whether it's covered by the plan, whether it's subject to a discounted rate, or whether it needs to be referred out, we can refer it to the right place. So I think time is of the essence in employment law. There's no question. And so any time where you can have a seamless transition on each stage, you're going to save money, time, and a lot of times you're going to preserve your rights and preserve your ability to act in a situation where you wouldn't be able to do that if you waited too long. And so that kind of gets to the overall is just, you know, the more in employment law that you let things go, the more things will happen, and then the more rights will be possibly implicated that will cause your the amount, I guess, the breadth of decisions that you could make to shrink. So they're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where you're going to be hemmed in. So the earlier you get to us, the more all options are on the table, and the more we can kind of flesh those out and figure out what truly needs to happen here, what really is the issue, what are the different tools that are available to us at this time to get that done.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one neat thing about, you know, the way our HR advisors work with our employment law advisors is that they're going to ask the question. They're going to, you know, say, hey, is this something that crosses that line? Or they know when they're getting close to that line and are going to engage the Soule team sooner. One of the questions that we've got that I'll answer is that 5 hours are included in the basic level of membership. How do you know where your usage is? We'll tell you, and it is not at five hours and 1 minute. We're cutting you off. You know, we err on the side of service and making sure that they're going to wrap up that piece of service and say, hey, next call, you're going to enter into the area where you can still access the employment law advice. It will just be at an hourly fee, and that is significantly reduced from what it would cost you to call a lawyer on the open market. So, and then I've been asked, please remind of the process for securing consultation on any legal issue. Yeah, so the process for this is for our Catapult members, call into the advice line or chat the advice line, the HR advisors, and they will look at what you're asking, and they will engage our employment law advice team quickly if it's something that's very obvious. And if not, they're going to dig a little bit deeper and talk to you. I know I've got some of our great HR advisors on the line too today. They're going to dig into it and find out if it's going to approach that line. And they're going to make sure that you are engaged correctly. If you are not a Catapult member, you can call in and we will tell you how you can join for a very reasonable rate to become a Catapult member and use our employment law advice as well as our HR advice and many other things, including these two great teams. So Rob, talk a little bit about that line between what is HR advice and where it tiptoes up and then goes across that line to really needing legal advice.
Yeah, I mean, technically anytime you're applying the law to a particular situation, you know, a particular issue or problem, you're in the legal advice realm. I think when HR, you know, is unique in the sense that the employment relationship is very regulated, the laws are very, are sort of shot through the entire practice. I think, you know, look at the HR advice team, you know, those are your HR business partners. They're like an extension of your in-house team. So they're available 24/7. You can call them anytime and talk through these. So it might, you know, I think they're kind of someone who can help quarterback the situation, put you in touch with whatever Catapult or other resource you may need, including legal. And then they're good also at sort of identifying that this might be a high risk issue. This might be an area where the law is uncertain. This might be an area that's just truly a legal issue, a dispute, something that implicates you know, your rights and obligations and the employees. So so it's not that bright line that you might see with something such as litigation. You know, we're clearly in legal, but that's where you have those two teams who work together so that I would say your first port of call is always that advice team. They're the ones that can help you kind of think through the issue, bounce ideas off of, utilize the full value of your membership and all the different resources you may have. You know, they have lots of templates that we've reviewed a lot in many cases and put our comments in. So there's all types of ways that they may be able to help you. And then of course they may all say, yeah, you really need to talk to one of our lawyers and use, either one of your 5 hours or part of that, or if you have the premium plan, then unlimited, I mean, then you don't have to worry about that, but they'll get you over there at the right time. But we always will help sort of figure that out as well. You know, we might say, you know, this really isn't a much of a legal issue. You should really talk to them and kind of use some of those internal resources so that you're using whatever benefits you have efficiently.
That's what I think is so unique about the plan and the way it's been set up as a true partnership between Soule and Catapult, is that I do not know of other HR services companies that have this kind of expertise that they have available on, you know, in this partnership. And if you go directly to an employment lawyer, they often have, you know, little experience on the employee relations piece, right, and have a lot of experience on the law piece, where we're really able to get both of those working together as a team. And again, the legal issues stay within the attorney-client privilege, but where appropriate, our team's going to work together on issues that are not deeply legal, and they're going to say, hey, what should we do here? What's going to make most sense for the client and the member so that they can do the things that they need to. So I think those are the ends of my questions. Are there any final thoughts that you'd love for our members and clients to know about?
No, I would just say personally, you know, I was a CAI, now Catapult member prior to that. And I had, you know, we were managing a company, was growing very fast. And, you know, HR isn't typically something you put your first dollars to, right? You're always sort of building that out later. And so I felt like to be able to have these resources really extended the capability of my HR decision-making and expertise. And that's how we approach it, is at all times attempting to kind of demystify all this for you, help you improve your practices, help you get your policies tailored to what makes sense for you, all those types of things, so that you kind of spend less time thinking or worrying about HR. I know that, you know, thinking about your people and managing your people is always on top of everybody's mind. So we try to make the administrative and the legal side of that as easy and as seamless as possible. But just to go back to my prior thing, it only works if you kind of use it. So I think if you use it and you understand how that can really help your business, then it's an incredible value, and you'll get a lot out of it. But but you got to use it and call early for any issues, for sure.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. You know, really it is about using the benefits and the services that you have. You know, we really pride ourselves at Catapult, and kind of our mission is to provide employers with the confidence to navigate everyday operational challenges. And we're going to help you make your workplaces more effective and employees more successful. So if you can avoid legal issues and getting the hassle of that, and getting your team's time and effort, and of course finances focused on that, then you really are able to live in a world where you can have an exceptional workplace, and your employees are driving your business, and you're not having to worry about these things. So Rob, I want to thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And I know that our members have gotten a lot out of this today, and I would expect that we will get some actual legal questions to our HR advice line shortly after this.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Absolutely. Thank you. And everyone, we appreciate you being here. And again, look at calling us or chatting with our HR advice team if you've got any questions. We'd be happy to help.